Niko. Welcome back. The madhouse that is the American political scene is getting madder by the day. The latest is that Joe Biden has definitely decided he's running. All these tales of him bowing out before the convention, Gavin Newsom coming in, or Kamala taking over, have apparently been definitively ruled out by Biden. He is on the ticket. And so people have got the choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Doesn't say much for American democracy, does it?
Hey, George, that's not fair. Nikki Haley says she's going to stay until the election and anything can happen. I'm just kidding. She's not going to win. But you're correct. Yeah, it's basically between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And although the American people don't really like those options overall, the reality is that I think that if all things are even, Trump is going to win, which is why I don't actually believe that the decision is actually in Joe Biden's hands. I think that he believes it's in Joe Biden's hands, and he believes that there's no threat from the powers that be within the Democratic Party that want an up-and-comer who's fresh and doesn't have as much baggage attached. I think he believes it's his choice, but in reality, I don't think that he has a choice. If they want to replace him, they will.
And what are the possibilities of that? It's getting late in the day, isn't it? They'd have to shuffle old Joe, Genocide Joe, off the end of a pier somewhere, and they'd then only have a matter of months to get somebody else in and run them, whilst Joe remained in the White House, haunting them like Banquo's ghost. It's a pretty tricky maneuver, isn't it?
Actually, the later that the Democratic Party waits to replace Joe Biden, the better. And we know from history that the Democratic Party isn't above replacing you at the convention. They're not above using their superdelegates to select who they actually want to be the nominee at the convention. Now, if you dig deep enough and if you have long enough to do the research, and allow that research to have time to actually spread, you would find plenty of baggage about Gavin Newsom. You probably would find that the majority of his own state doesn't really like him all that much. Obviously, compared to Joe Biden, maybe people believe that he doesn't have nearly as much baggage, and the loyal Democrat and the loyal liberal vote for him because they'll say, well, at least he can beat Trump and at least he's better than Trump by their vantage point. But the reality is, if they select Gavin Newsom at the convention, how much opposition research could you possibly do between then and November? Because your opposition research is going to basically be based on what? Is he better than Trump? And once again, by some people's vantage point, by the average onlooker who hasn't done a lot of research on Gavin Newsom, the later he joins, the less likely they are to find out who he actually is.
Now, you mentioned Nikki Haley, or we could give her her original name, but why bother trying to pronounce it? She's Nikki Haley now. She's white now, even though plainly she's of Indian ethnicity, but she defines herself as white. And we live in the age of self-definition. Is she still getting funding? Is she still a viable candidate, even though Trump has decisively beaten her?
First of all, I do got to say, Nikki is literally white Kamala for the Republican Party. It's kind of hilarious, the comparison with Kamala running in 2020 and trying to ignore her Indian side and pretending she's actually ran on being black her entire life, which isn't true, while we're simultaneously watching Nimrata do the same thing, but for the Republican Party while pretending she's white. It's just hilarious. I mean, a woman literally claimed that there is no such thing as racism. So, but she was never a viable candidate, George. That didn't change the fact that she was receiving a bunch of money from the Democrats and the Republican elite. So she's still getting the money. I believe that there is a goal, perhaps, to continue to spread the message that she is putting out, which is probably more important than actually beating Donald Trump, which is pretending that, the only reason Hamas exists is because of Iran somehow, continuing to finger point at Putin or saber rattle at Iran, literally saying that we should assassinate Iranian leaders Soleimani style. So basically disregard international law and just commit extrajudicial killings of foreign leaders. But clearly she's still polling decently well, for her status. So, maybe that's what they care about, and that's why they're keeping her in power, because we all know the Oval Office doesn't have as much control over the outcome of circumstance in this country as much as the opinions people hold, which sway the Oval Office to pretend as if they're going to pass or advocate for certain policies, especially when it comes to foreign policy.
Now, what about Zion Don himself? He said today that, imagine, 3 years ago there was peace in the Middle East, which isn't, of course, true, but relatively speaking, there was less war in the Middle East 3 years ago when he was in power than there is today. What do you think he, if he was president again, would do differently?
So, like you said, there is that caveat. That's relatively speaking, because we can't forget, ironically, Trump vetoed legislation that was sending weapons to Saudi Arabia that they were using to bomb Yemen. Trump was just as active using the drone program, even though he didn't expand the drone program to the degree that Obama did in the various nations that Obama used them in. He still was taking full advantage of the drone program, even though he's come out and recently complained about it. I do believe, however, because of the weird way Trump's ego works, he would not let Netanyahu get away with what he's doing right now, because this would make effectively Donald Trump look like a puppet of Netanyahu. Whereas before, a lot of the stuff that Trump was doing in Israel and the relationship that he had maintained during his administration was like he was the advocate for Israel. But there's obviously a fine line from being an advocate to being a puppet. And what Netanyahu is demanding of all his loyalists right now, he's demanding a loyalty to the point of being a puppet. And I don't believe that Trump would allow it. I think that he would probably just, not for the best of reasons, not for the right reasons, but he knows that this type of stuff looks bad. When you have, he wanted to pull the CIA out of Syria. He was the one who announced he wanted to leave Afghanistan, and he had a plan to do so the right way. Joe Biden kind of mucked that up, but he was the one who tried to pull out Iraq. He was even complaining about Iran and the way that the U.S. had planned on handling them, saying that John Bolton wanted to use the Libya model, right? So this is the opposite of what we're getting from Joe Biden right now. And I believe that with Joe Biden being so open to just basically going to war with everybody, which is what it seems like at the moment, then how can there ever be any peace? People are ramping up. What we're seeing, I don't believe that attack was legitimately from Iran, but also, could we be surprised? Should we be surprised? The U.S. has been threatening Iran pretty consistently for the last year. And you look at what we're doing in the region, they have every reason to want to be skeptical and defend themselves. I mean, based off of what Trump and his administration and the U.S. government said, if you feel a threat of an imminent attack from your enemies, you can kill who you want to. That's what they said about Soleimani. So would Iran really be wrong for being proactive? Probably not.
The vice president's position for Trump. There's a rumor that he's talking with or seeking to talk with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That would be problematic, I think, in a number of respects, but it would also be unbeatable at the polls, I think. Is there any legs to that story?
I don't know. I think that RFK Jr. would probably be open to it. I've heard that he's been open to potentially partnering with Tulsi because he's polling so well. And to be honest, surprisingly so, because his pro-Israel stance should have probably killed him in the polls. And it's killing Biden somehow, but it's not actually killing RFK Jr. So being able to actually combine, because RFK Jr. is better on a lot of foreign policy issues than Trump. And he's definitely better when it comes to issues that a lot of people have took issue with Donald Trump, which is his advocacy for Operation Warp Speed, for example. He's better on those issues. And he is honestly probably better in the black community. I mean, RFK Jr. is actually extremely popular amongst black academics, people who are on the ground. He's very popular amongst black celebrities in a similar way that Trump is. And at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with the Kennedy on your side, because that name recognition will take you farther than policy ever could, to be honest with you.
Fascinating, Niko. I wish we had more time. I'm deeply grateful to you for joining us on the mother of all talk shows, one of our most popular guests. Thanks for being with us.